So I welcome all of the players from Czech Republic and Germany on the International Chess Weekend 2022. I have there some intro, like special thanks to Pilsner Region and Pilsner Chess Union for this special weekend they organized. It is fantastic for everybody, practically for every children. So my speech would be in English. I'm not the native speaker, of course, but I will try to to be as good as I can in English, and hopefully all of you can understand me. And my lecture will be about Queen's exchanges or Queen's trades. You naturally have many options during the chess game where you are thinking about how it would be without queens, how it would be with queens, and sometimes you have also the chance, realistic chance, to organize the queen's trade or decline the queen's trade. And as I was a kid, I always heard something about if you have more material, you may trade practically everything, the queens at most. But it is not that true as much because it depends on many factors. It is not only about material side. Of course, material is one of the most important things during the game, but also positional factors, also the piece's value. So if you want to trade queens, or if you want to accept or decline the queen's trade, you have to think about what it would bring to you, how it would basically happen, because you can trade once and maybe you can trade in a different situation, in a different circumstances, and it is all depending how it finally would be evaluated, the final position after the queen's trade, or if you decline after the situation where you decline the queen's trade. So, well, what is the most important after, let's say, material side? Most important in this position where you are thinking about the queen's trade, it's the king's position. How safe is your king? How safe the opposite king is, and what tactical and what opportunities you have to attack the king, because all the attacks are more powerful with the queen on board, of course. So if you trade queens, the tactical options will diminish a little, at least, or it would bring totally different options than the attack, of course. So king's safety, king's position, this is the most important. Then also the value of the queen. If you have a good queen, you may not trade the queen. If the queen of the opposite side is even better, you may tend to trade the queens, of course. So it is also a factor. Also other pieces on the board, bishops, rooks, knights. If they have a better value, then you can trade queens, of course. You can get the end game. You need to evaluate the end game after the queen's trade. And after all, also structural advantages, structural disadvantages, how the structure of pawns is. If you have some weakness, if you need to care about some weak pawn or something like that, you will also think about Without queens, all the weaknesses are even weaker, probably. Because there will be no tactical chance, there will be no attacking option. So it would be maybe all about the weaknesses. But yeah, let's finish this theoretical things, and we will see some practical examples how it is with the queen straight. So let's go to the first one. There, in this typical, this is really typical scenario where white sacrifices something. There is 5 pawns for white, 7 pawns for black. So black has some material advantage. So logically, white will tend to hold the queens on board. White will never trade queens, like queen takes b4 is probably not the candidate at all. But the candidate could be take a pawn on h6, and after the queen's trade, get back with the bishop to take on d2. I mean, something like this, where white has a bishop pair, but as spoken before, as mentioned, the chance to kill the black's king would be not so high as with the queens on board. So maybe that's not satisfying position for white at all. So we will seek something else. What we can seek, probably moving the queen somewhere, c2, d3, d1 maybe. Or we can think about get something in between, rook c3. We are setting the rook in between the queens, so we declined the trade. But well, after rook c3, e4 is happening. Rook is under attack and has to move, probably, or not. It's hard to say. Do we have a good square for the queen? c2 is probably the best, but we are leaving our battery here. So why to leave?
We can't see the board.
You can't see the board. But I'm sharing my... I'm not sharing, sorry. How I can share the board? That could be. Now it's better?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for that. Thank you. I forgot to click on that. So yeah, now it would be clear. Now white, I will repeat once more. White will think about bishop takes h6, queen takes d2, and bishop takes d2 back. Something like bishop takes h6, queen takes d2, and bishop takes d2 back. White has a bishop pair, but black has still a pawn more, and the chance for getting the final attack is nothing so perfect. So this position might be plus minus equal, and that's not what white desires for. So as mentioned, now queen c2, queen d3, queen d1. This is declining the queen straight. What white needs to hold the queen on board, but all the squares are losing the battery, losing the power against the h6 square. So logically, you may tend to judgment that rook c3 would be the best move. But what will happen after e4? After e4, the rook is under attack. What is your opinion? Can somebody tell me what to do after rook c3 and e4 in this position? Do we have some solution? Okay, is bishop takes h6 the solution? Because there is no trade. But if we are fast now with the solution, bishop takes h6, logically sacrifice the rook. Yeah, bishop takes c3 is not working for him. That's logical. But if we are in a hurry, if we want to finish the black's king so fast, like bishop takes h6, that will be the trade. Queen d4 check. And we have to trade queens, what we are not in desire for. And probably this position would be still around equal, but hardly can we find a killing method. Like we are losing also the exchange here on c3. So this is not good. But we are thinking about it once more, and we need a queen. So what we need to do is get out from the double attack. So there are some king h2, king h1, or a3, kicking the queen out. And we are not worrying at all about the rook. It's not about the rook. The rook has some value, of course. We want to get the rook also in the attack, but we don't need the rook if we have the queen, basically. The bishop has much more value for black than the rook for white, because without the bishop on g7, black cannot defend simply. Imagine the situation. King h2, bishop takes c3, b takes c3. The queen has to move somewhere, and after something like bishop takes h6, with queen g5 coming, or queen f4, queen g4, that's happening, the checkmate soon, very soon. And black has no response, probably. So this is how it works. Like, we need a queen, basically, so we have to deal with it like that. We need to think about it this way. But this was one simple example where it was all clear that the black's king is weaker, that we have the capacity how to attack the king. So the judgment was clear. The judgment was letting queens on board, not trade them, and give up the exchange for it. Yeah, we are giving up the rook for the bishop just for letting the queens on board and rolling with the queens. Okay, let's go for the second example. That would be maybe more tough. And there is a pin. We are the knight here. He is twice under attack. Rook and the queen are attacking our knight. We have basically two chances what to do. First of all, we can do knight f7. Knight f7 means we are getting into the option that white will trade queens. The second option for black is cover the knight with the rook, rook e8, and then probably try to do some kingside attack. But first of all, we need to judge the position which will happen after the queen's trade. Any opinions how it would be after knight f7, queen takes g8, and possibly rook takes g8? How is the position like? The position is probably lost for black. There's no hope at all. b7 is a factor, b7 is a weakness. We will lose the b7 long term, is unable to hold, because white simply gets the attackers, sets the rook on the b file. We can cover it with the rook, of course. We can get the rook on b8, but then the a pawn will go slowly and hit. And it's easy, and we have no counterplay. No counterplay at all. There's no chance to escape. So that's a factor. If the endgame is so lost as this is, then we need to keep the queens on board. And logically, the queens is operating well, of course. The white queen is very active, but we have also the battery here. We are working against the white's king, and even if white's king is safe just now, he would be not so safe in a few moves. If we get the g5, if we can open the g file, and if we can use the queen, which is now, just for now, the queen is worse. That's true. Our queen is worse, but if we cannot get into the endgame, if we basically evaluated the endgame as lost, then we need to fight with queens. There are no other probabilities. So let's go for rook e8 and try to get some attack, because there could be some attacking option, really. Yeah, because now white, what to do for white? White has to take the queen somewhere and operate the queen on the better square. Maybe something like this could be an option, or maybe working with the a pawn is also possible. But now white is also under pressure, because knight c6 is a threat, possibly attacking the pawn here. And also g5 could be a threat later, with some sacrifice options on g3. So this is not that easy as it shall be in the endgame for white, because the endgame would be easy, really easy. So this is the second example. Let's go for the third one, where there is, yeah, this is a hell on the board. Both kings are totally under pressure. Probably some checkmate threats on both sides. And there is a perpetual. There is a simple perpetual, queen b4 check. If the king moves on c1, queen a3 check, and this is a draw. So if black wants to, black has a draw possibility. Very simple, I have to say. But does he want to? There is a queen straight possible. There is a queen straight after knight takes e5, queen takes g7, king d6, queen takes e5, queen takes e5, knight takes e5, and king takes e5. Black finishes this line with plenty of pawns more. Plenty. I feel that there will be only one in the finish, but black has definitely some material advantage. But the trouble is that his pawns are not yet so important for the game, not yet so attacking, forcing something to do. He needs to move them first. White pawns are, yeah, imagine g takes h6 and h7. The pawn is on h7, really important for white. So if we calculate and visualize it, we need to care about the position. Like, it's really tough. This is really tough to hold for black, just because after f4 tempi here, and maybe g takes h6 simply with h7 to follow, the pawn on h7 would be totally deep in our position, and we have to care about him. Our pawns are well together, but not yet working. So the position is not perfect. So it speaks against the queen straight. But as mentioned on the beginning, maybe we can desire in the different sort of the queen straight. What about knight a3 check, king c1, queen takes c2, queen takes c2, knight takes c2, And he probably cannot take the knight because of bishop a4 check, getting the exchange. I was probably fast, so once more, this, and there white probably cannot take because of bishop a4, and getting the exchange like this means black is winning. Yeah, because that's unacceptable for white to do so. But that's not forced, of course. Here, he may not tend to take the knight. White will probably hold the knight here, and using the fact it's materially equal, only some pawns for black, well, some plenty of them, but white has bishop takes g7, double attack, and then h, g are going together, hand in hand. So if you get into this position, you need to think what happens if white normally gets the cover for the knight, h3. Now after knight b4, there's the bishop g7, and maybe g takes h6 is even better than bishop takes h6. Let's go for the early beginning. Here we need to calculate it all and calculate it proper and evaluate it so that the endgame would be perfect. But we only need to do the safety. And the safety means we need to cover the g7 pawn. In that line, after knight a3, here, there, and after rook h3, there is simple rook g8, holding it all and getting the winning endgame. Well, winning. I say winning, but it's still tough. But engine speaks about winning. But it's never so easy behind the board to evaluate it. So yeah, maybe I I can ask who of you will play the check, knight a3 check here. Maybe no one, because it's really risky. It's some sort of risk, because we are getting into the long variation where anything can happen, but we need to be self-confident in this part, because we are truly deserving that the strategy we are using, like getting the end game, must be perfect with so many players on board, with so many pawns, practically more, that must be winning. It's only necessary to hold the pawn on g7. And let's get there once more into it and see what happens after king takes. And there, everything happening, and after c5, it's easily to be seen that white's pieces are stuck together, like without any operating probabilities. Meanwhile, black has a simple plan. Black will take the a pawn and move him into the queen. And we are getting also the position, some knowledge. If you have a rook against two minor pieces, like knight plus bishop, you have to have a free pawn. You have to have some passed pawn, because it can easily happen that the side with the minor pieces have to sacrifice one of these two for the passed pawn, so you will get the exchange more in the finish. So yeah, two minor pieces are basically better than the rook is, but if the side with the rook has a passed pawn, free one, then it's naturally, it depends on the position, but it's really healthy to have a rook with a passed pawn. And there black has practically 3 together connected. So it has to be winning. Okay, getting some easier, and also shows the typical thing, what happens after the queen's trade. This is already pretty end game, major pieces end game, and yeah, you may at first you may calculate the queen's trade. Queen takes c6, rook c6, rook b8 check, and rook back on c8. Anyone see the continuation? Here, there, check, rook's back. Now it might be simple, isn't it? Rook takes, and rook takes. And now the rook cannot hold the a8. Sorry, I have trouble with rook, the mouse. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My mouse is not working. I don't know why. Okay, I will continue in this. So now the black's rook is like in a tough situation because there she cannot cover the both sides, so it is lost because after rook moving to a8, there is a simple pawn more with so passive rook, and it's also a factor like trading queens for getting such an endgame with a pawn more and with a wonderful piece against such a rook in the corner. So this is something to be mentioned here, like naturally winning endgame. So that's not so often happening, but always care about tactics. If you have a pawn like this on a7, that's a wonderful one. And of course, the side opposite has also a wonderful pawn. It's very often that we want to combine our threats, like with the pawn push, with combine it with the attack against the king. But here the king is safe, as same as our king. It's not so easy to construct any attacking options against the king. So even queen b3, like attacking f7, that means nothing because he has rook c7 probably, where it's all well covered, and we may long term we may lose our joker on a7. So now or never. Now if we calculate the tactics proper, we have to do it. We have to get the very simple win just because of evaluating the endgame smart. Okay, move on. This is probably the most wonderful example of the king's position. Now we are thinking as blacks, we have to think if we want to trade queens, or the second option is only one, queen f7, because we have the knight under attack, and if we cover the knight with the g6 with the d6 square, then the knight will take with a tempo and hitting the queen. So we are thinking about queen takes e4 or queen f7. And we have to realize which king is weaker. which side has more dominant potential to get the king. Of course, if we get the queen to f7, we are attacking along the f file, so it's probably necessary for white to get the king in just like safety, castling long. So after queen f7, we have to evade that he will castle and then h4, and then the sides will go and try to be faster. Who of you is thinking that black can be faster in this attack after queen f7? Okay. I don't believe that no one, but maybe you are not sure. Let's think about it. Let's think about the variation, like queen f7. White will do the castle. We will naturally go and roll, and he will also try to roll over on the king side. But basically, we are first who is going through, who is taking on a3. So basically, that means that we have a good chance to set as first side the checkmate. Like going through the first means checkmating as first, because who is going for the lunch at first is first eating. That's logically. So that all speaks for queen f7, because the queen straight means, okay, we will take, he will take, we have the knight under attack, we have also b7 under attack, so it's also some negative thing in the position, but maybe it's equal. What else? There are materially equal, kings are equal, the rooks possibilities, white will get the d file for the rook. So maybe after the queen straight, the position is really equal. But what happens after queen f7? Queen f7, castles, and let's go b4, h4, and b takes. That cannot be ignored. He has to retake, and we will probably retake, and he will take. Now he is starting his campaign, and the fact is, if we retake here, he could be faster because, okay, we got the move, rook takes a3, and he doesn't care about moving the rook in our camp. He will probably desire in opening the g file, like g takes f4 and so on, going to the g file, and maybe he could be faster. So now or never, again, now we need to be first in the checkmating operation. Does anybody see some checkmating operation? Checkmating probability for black? Any construction? What about rook a1 check? King b2. Rook a2 check. Like if he takes, then we will checkmate him sooner or later. Like double check, and queen has to walk in, and that must be fitting. That must be like checkmate in 3-4 moves. But it's not...
rook f a8.
Yeah. Seriously, that could be the trick. But first I will finish the idea with rook a1. So rook a1, king b2, rook a2, and now he will not take. He will get the king to b1. Now maybe the idea with rook f to a8, and it's probably working in general. It has to be working, but there white has g6, and believe or not, the position is draw. Maybe you may never believe, but if we get into it, like check, check, he will simply escape because our queen is under attack and we have no good move with the knight here because the queen is under attack. So there is some perpetual option, same as your idea, as you mentioned. Your idea was probably playing here, rook to a8. That's practically the same. Again, the g6 will be coming, and we are back in the same line where our queen has no squares and is under attack. So that's a little trouble, and that's a trouble we know about it, and it's simple to avoid. We need to be faster in this process of getting the queen in the fire. So what we will logically do, we have to move out the knight. So where the knight from d5? Where shall we go? Any idea? The truth is we have to be fast. Because we want to checkmate him first. If we are not fast enough, it would be probably only draw, or we can manage also the lose.
Knight c3.
Knight c3, good. That's a tempo, that's attacking the queen. It has only one disadvantage, because he will take with the bishop and get a square for the king. We cannot let the king escape. So with the same idea as knight c3, we will play more likely into f6. And knight f6, this is a move. With the same idea, logically attacking the queen, but with knight f6, he will not deliver the bishop away. That means he will never escape from the checkmating net. So after knight f6, he logically accepts. There is a check. And this is the coming. There the queen is coming into the game and finishes it off. Like check. And if the king moves into it, there is a wonderful sacrifice. Because this is the last defender, and always again, a little knowledge to have. King and the knight, this is a good pair for the defense. Knight is a great defender because he is controlling many squares in the near of the king. So if we sacrifice the rook and get the knight, we will logically get the second rook sooner or later in the game. This one will get and logically decide the game for us, because after king c3, queen a3, king c4, and b5, he cannot escape. There would be the checkmate sooner or later. It has to happen. It has to happen because his pieces are oriented against our king, but we were the first side who starts with the campaign against the king. And that's all about it. It's more about feeling, mainly. Here, again, at start, it's more about feeling if we are ready to fight with the opposite castlings. We have to evade that he will castle on the side, on the queen side, and we have to be like sure that we get the chance, be the first, like forcing the checkmate or forcing him to resign. And that means b4 has to be played earlier than h4, because these moves are opening the sides for the both sides. And if we are first with the b4, then we are probably ready to say, no, I don't want to trade queens. I want to fight with the queens, and I want to kill the king as the first one. Okay, let's move on into the endgame, which is not that simple as it seems to be, where black has practically a pawn more, because we have some double pawn here, which is bad one. That's bad to have some double pawn like this, but it's not that bad, because on the side he has two pawns on the dark squares. We have dark's bishops, dark color of bishop, and that means we have some advantage. If we trade queens, we can probably use our bishop to challenge on the side. There is also an option, as in a chapter 2 or 3, there is an option to draw, like queen f5 check, and if he gets back, we have to go with the queen on c8 back, and yeah, that means it would be probably a draw, because he cannot get the bishop in between. So yeah, does anybody of you see the different option than queen f5 check? What can we do if we want to trade queens? No one? What about queen c4? Queen c4 holds our pawn. It's getting the queen for the trade. If he is not in a mood for trading, then he has to care about f7 also. And at last, we will attack the a5 pawn. That will be decider. If we take the pawn, then the pawn would be lost. And with him would be also b4 falling. So logically, after queen f5 check, declining would be queen c4. And he naturally has to accept the queen's trade. And b takes c4 logically continues. But the question is what we are going to do after b3. Who thinks, let's say, now in this position, who of you thinks that the queen c4 was a good idea? Yeah, maybe no one. Just because black will eat the pawn and go. This is dangerous. Do we have any chance against it? for sure, we have a chance to play bishop c1. But do we want to play bishop c1? Never. We are not in desire of playing such a move, because then the bishop is killed. So if we made to play queen c4 with an idea to cover the pawn on b2 with the bishop on c1, that's not good. This is sick idea. That's really not healthy. So
C5, C6, C7, C8.
Cool. Naturally, yeah, we have our joker. Wonderful. That's an idea. That's an approach. But is he in a mood to do it just in time? Like c5, e4, c6, bishop takes, and we cannot play c7 because of bishop e5. Do you have any resource still? Maybe bishop f4 to prepare the c7 push. But then we are standing both queens together, which means it will be probably a draw. Let's see how it will run. Here, there, here. He will take. Now we cannot push c7. We have to cover first. He will get somewhere with the bishop. I don't know. We will push and he will push. We are making a queen. He is also making a queen. Hardly to get something more than a draw. Maybe it's still open game, but I will strongly believe this might be a draw because of reduced material. Both kings are in a good condition. So it would be probably only a draw. If we want a more, we have to find something more. And that all in this position. Is it really so dangerous, the pawn on b? He has like 2 steps in the queen. But first of all, he has to take. And in the end games, what is the most important piece? What is the most important person on the board? That's our king. Is he able to do it? If we can run fast, we are able to do it. Or let's calculate at least. King g3, e4, king f4, bishop takes, king takes, bishop somewhere, I don't know where, and we are in a business just in time. b2 and king c2, we got it. And that's the margin. We got the pawn, and it will be the pawn more for us, because on the way we also smashed the pawn on e4. So that's some knowledge for you, like general knowledge. It's hard to call any general advices, but always care about the king's position if you think about the queen's trade, because usually if you trade queens, you are getting into the end game, and if you have better king, if your king is more dominant, like taking the weaknesses, taking care about the weaknesses, and yeah, if he is not ready to get into the queen, then it's a weakness, just because he is impossible to cover. The black's king cannot get so close, so far to cover him. So long term, this pawn and also this pawn are so big weaknesses. So if we can calculate till that, then in the initial position, we will decline the draw with queen f5, but we will fight for the win with queen c4, getting the b pawn under control. The question is, do he really need to play b3 here? Couldn't he play bishop d8 just to cover the pawn on a5 and walking the king closer? The answer is no. Basically, he cannot long-term stay alive with the bishop just only holding the pawn here. That's the same situation or similar situation like our bishop on c1 holding. Now our bishop is active. Materially speaking, it's equal. Kings are equal, but we have much better bishop because he has targets, and that's the margin. Okay, let's move on. Again, the situation for black. And again, the factor we mentioned in the early beginning. We have a queen which is bad. The queen on c6 has no service. If she can move somewhere around like f3, e2, if she can get into the king's close, then it would be attractive, and then we can have a good deal. We can have a good game. But now our queen is behind the boards, like simply closed in the c7, b8, e7, really closed in our camp. And basically white has a simple plan. If we manage the queen c7, he will slowly push, and push into the queen. And we have no counterplay. So the only chance for us to stay alive is trade queens, basically, because if our queen is bad, then the opposite queen is wonderful. She has all the board for herself. So under some circumstances like this, trade queens, just because your queen has no value, the opposite queen has much more value as 10 points as it is in the beginning of the game. So let's trade if it is at least playable. And yeah, when it is playable, when the king reaches the pawns, that has to be calculated, of course. If he cannot, then we cannot do it. So the question is, after queen takes and knight takes, where are you moving the bishop? We have to move the bishop somewhere. Which square is the best? Best and practically only. Someone. Maciej can try. Do you have any square for the bishop where the bishop can be available for some service? Yeah, we have a square, logically. But it's never d8. This is not a good square, even if the bishop is controlling the knight, but also the knight is controlling the bishop, and that's even more. And now white will tend to do the plan so simple, very simple, and win. So d8, such a bishop square is never good. That's generally speaking nonsense. So the bishop has to stay active. bishop has to walk on e5. And after b5, a takes, and king f8, c6, b takes, and b takes. King reaches the destination, reaches the pawn, but still we have to manage some calculation. What to do if white takes the king and moves into it? Yeah. What to do against this plan, that simple plan, getting the king to b7 and then focus on closing the run? Do we have any campaign against it? Hard to see some breakthrough. f6, g5. Fairly speaking, I can see some breakthrough, but I'm not sure whether it brings something.
Bishop b2.
Okay, bishop b2 then. Bishop c1. Bishop d2.
Yes.
Yes, it could be. It could be a way. Yeah, sure. That could be some possibility, of course. Getting the bishop to b2, waiting for the king, moving on c2, then getting the bishop to a3, waiting for kings moving to b3, and then going back to c1 and desiring some option like this. Good, great. It could be, but there is a simpler way for black. But the same idea. Again, good idea, great idea, but easier to do this idea is moving the king to d8 and then moving the bishop across the c7, a5, e1. Because white cannot take on c7, of course. So that's a little easier, but still your idea was same promising and practically doing the same idea, getting the powerful bishop, because all of the pawns are on the dark squares. If you have the dark squares bishop, you have to have a good endgame, of course. And one basics to all of these, if the fight is on both sides, and it is still on both sides, then the bishop is better than the knight, because knight is slower. He cannot transfer himself from side to side so fast as the bishop can. So basically the bishop couldn't be worse in a position like that, even more when he has the targets on dark squares. So yeah, that means one basic knowledge to that, it's not general, it's not that general, but queen plus knight are cooperating better than queen plus bishop in the endgames. So the side with the bishop will always tend to trade queens, just because the endgame with the bishop against knight depends on the structure, depends on how strong the knight and how strong the bishop is. But basically, queen plus knight are good working together. They are good cooperative workers, the more than queen plus bishop, just because they need some battery. And that's not so often that they can use some powerful battery in an endgame position. Okay, let's go furthermore. Here, it's logical for white to think that his position is better. He has all the pieces much better. Black has a good queen on a2. So what can white do with it? Of course, there is an f file also. There are some approaches like knight g5 and queen f3 and some of these challenges against the f7. Why not? Let's say, why not? But the queen is still holding it. And what's more important, queen is attacking our bishop. So what is the first candidate you may calculate in a position like this?
Queen b3.
Queen b3, great, wonderful, yeah. That could be a solution because we will dismiss the most powerful factor in the black's camp. He has all the other pieces are wrong. Also the bishop, he is closed there, only defender. Knight on a6, what to say to him? He is so bad. So if we trade the queens, we will still have a good chance of dominating over the b file. What we are only doing negative is we will never use the power over the f file so much, because without queens on board, the fire would be not so attractive. But we are going through the b file, and it's maybe even better. Not the straight attack, but attack from the side here. It's maybe even stronger than the straight attack over the f file. That speaks all for the queen b3. But first, let's imagine, couldn't we hit the queen somehow? Couldn't we trap the queen on the side? Isn't it possible something like rook b3? Aren't we trapping the queen? Rook b3, rook f2.
Rook b8.
Sure, perfect. Yeah, we cannot do two moves in a row. That's bad. If we can do these two moves in a row, then the queen would be trapped. But after rook b3, he will immediately answer with the rook b8. That means after rook f2, we will lose the rook on b3. So after rook b8, we are in a trouble. Yeah, so we will never do such a move, getting ourselves in a trouble. We wanna get him under trouble. So after queen b3, we are operating against f7. So he desperately needs to trade queens, and he will. And we are having the b file for us because the bishop is holding him for e7 pawn. So he cannot get the rook to b8 because of a simple trade, or maybe even better than the simple trade here is following with the second rook and getting the file. Just because if we take on b8 and he will retake with the rook, he will only take a pawn, only one little single pawn, and his rook will be good over the b file. If we double first, we are closing his chances. Now rook takes b8 is a threat, so he may focus on a pawn. He may do something like this, and we are in. We are just moving the rook into the position. And even if we are not threatening the immediate take on a7, we are dominating the board. He has no squares. He has absolutely no moves possible. And he will probably desperately try to do something like this. But he will do only holes with such an approach. The question is what to do now, because we don't want to take. We don't want to get back with the bishop. Does anybody see the best move?
Knight g5.
Yeah, knight g5 is really good plan, but we are losing the bishop on a3.
Yeah.
But good plan, knight g5. That would be happening sooner or later. This plan is naturally healthy. But for that plan, we have to do first bishop d6. Because after bishop d6, we are earning time for getting the infiltration with the knight. And maybe even more than knight g5 will happen knight e5 afterwards. After the take, logical take on d6. We will probably lose the pawn on d6, but we will take every pawn on the board for him. So he will sacrifice himself, our d6 pawn here. He will sacrifice himself for getting f7, for getting c6, for getting a7, and that would be at least 2 pawns more endgame. Might be simply winning. That speaks all for the trade here, because his queen, even if she is totally away from game, she is only one on our side. She is only one attacking. That has to be traded, because if we trade this single good piece, he will have all the other pieces bad. All the other pieces are worse than ours. We have good rook on b, we have good rook on f, we have wonderful bishop attacking e7, and also our knight is much better than his knight on a6. So queen b3, perfect feeling. Let's move on. Believe or not, this is theoretical position still. This is something from Ruy Lopez, Spain, Spanish defense, where white has a good chance. We have the team. We have a team like queens exchanges, queens trades. So the team is like knight d4. Knight d4 attacking the queen. He naturally has to take. We are taking on e6, and we are getting out of the complication, because there is the only complication. There is a pin, which is annoying. Always the pin is something what you dislike, what you cannot so easy ignore. And of course, there is also a chance to take on f6. But if we once take on f6, we are getting into the trouble. We are getting into the position with the opposite castlings, and he will get naturally the g file to all his activities. He has already the d file option. So if we can trade queens, then we naturally have to do it. But what with the pawn? We are losing a pawn, aren't we? In this line, after knight d4, bishop takes, knight takes. Will bishop take on c2? Isn't it a trouble? And as I mentioned in the beginning, sorry?
Knight takes g7.
Yeah, but knight takes g7, bishop takes e4. He takes f6 and knight d5. It is not that clear who is better side here. And as mentioned before, it's about the activity of pieces. And with this take on g7, we are taking the pawn, of course, but we are getting the knight somewhere where he is not so attractive for us. On e6, he is really attractive. As same as with the take on e4, the bishop for him becomes attractive. But look at the position here. Do you feel the bishop on c2 is attractive? Not really. He is almost caught. His only chance is to take the e4. That was a little advice. Now, what will white do? Can you find a good move for white? I have to say very natural.
Bishop c5.
Yeah, okay, bishop c5 could be also good. It could be a tempo, of course. But if the bishop sits to c5, then you cannot get there the knight to c5. And you will probably use it later, the knight c5 move. So if you play bishop c5, then after king d7, you probably have to take on g7, and you will probably lose the pawn on e4, which you are not so likely desire into. So here the best move is f3. Yeah, closing the bishop's power, totally closing the bishop out of the game, and the bishop is really caught, because after f takes e5, rook c1, he has no squares. Yeah, because he couldn't be after bishop d3 and knight c5. He cannot get here because of a4. He cannot get there because of king f2. And if rook d8, there will be a simple pin after bishop g5. And this is amazing position where every black piece is under pressure. Rook is holding the knight, holding the bishop. Knight is meanwhile in the pin where the rook has to cover the knight, but the rook is already covering the bishop. So totally wrong situation, and black has no escape from this situation. So remember, at least generally speaking, the idea, like if you have better pieces at the end of the combination, like easily to be seen. Yeah, the knight is more dominant than the knight of black. Also the bishop, our bishop is a captain. He has the captain square. You naturally wanted to use him. Of course, that's a good point, to use the best piece on the board. But his bishop is worse. His bishop is totally away from the game once more. And at last, the rook. His rook is in a corner without any future, any potential hopes, because she cannot get to attack the knight, because it's only getting the tempo with knight takes g7. That cannot be played. So that's why this little combination with a knight d4 works. This little combination brings practically the win. That's why the line is not played nowadays in between the grandmasters, because grandmasters are simply better in acknowledging these little things in the openings. Okay, let's push more. And here we are in a position where white has a bishop, black has the knight, and easily to be seen that the knight is with troubles to get into the game. But also white's king is more safe than the black's. Black's king has a little trouble. And if white gets into the attack, it will probably finish in a simple win for white. So that brings the logical thinking process for black, like moving queen to f5, which is tending to get a queen straight. Logical, isn't it? If white takes, yeah.
Bishop.
Sorry. Sorry, can you finish it?
Queen f3.
Queen f3. In which position? Here, black will play queen f5. from the logic, he wants to trade queens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because black's king is weaker than the white's king. So that's logical idea, but black has one better idea than queen f5. Can someone find the better idea than queen f5? Because queen f5 is objectively a losing move, and we will see later what will happen after that. But what is better for black here? Can someone find the better move?
Um.
With the trick, with a little
Pawn takes
super.
h5.
Super. Yeah, that's it. G takes h5. With, okay, if we have a queen under attack, we will attack the queens. And after that trade, okay, white will appear with the pawn, with the passed pawn, outside passed pawn, we can call. It is really good. But black will appear with the pawn, which is also free, is covered by another one. And also the knight will get into the game. That is the key. That is really the key, which will probably get the game into equality. So this is the best what may happen, where the knight gets into the game fast. Cross the f6, he will get the game, and sooner or later the game finishes in a draw, because okay, the g-pawn is attractive, but without the support, I will basically set the king somewhere to f6 later on, or to g7, and you cannot get away from it. So it would be a draw. Meanwhile, the idea of black, queen f5, will let white take on g6, and black has to take somehow, and now black has to take on g6. What else? But then the knight cannot walk into the game at all. The motive of f8, h7, and f6 is now unreachable, and after the simple moving of the king, black's knight is totally demolished of the game. And also the black's king cannot hold the g-pawn push. And I will push simply the pawn and win. Because now black's knight has to get back, and such a position is practically unplayable, because black has absolutely no active plan. Meanwhile, white has a simple plan, pushing the g-pawn and win. That's all of it. Okay, there are still some complications, but such a complications aren't so, yeah, so making the margin like it wouldn't be winning. So that's all about the idea. Like, the idea was totally strong. Black has to trade queens, but also black has to think about the quality of other pieces. Like, if I have such a knight on f8, I have to trade queens with a supportive idea for the knight. I have to get him into the game, because without the knight operating in the game, I cannot get the end game with the knight against the bishop. So that's not so easy dealing with it. Like, you have to think about good idea. Trading queens is really good idea, but you also have to care about how will the situation happen after the queen's trade, because not all the endgames would be equal, and not all the endgames would be, yeah, better or worse. So different types of queen's trades. Okay. let's going into the best example for me, at least. This is really attractive because here both sides are really dangerous. Both sides are seeking the checkmating operations, and both sides, if they feel uncomfortable in the situation, both sides can force the trade. Like first, white can force the trade with queen b3. That seems to be forcing because, okay, the rook is under attack, but not only a rook, also the pawn is under attack. If white's queen takes on e6, it seems to be already more or less winning, even if there are still some options, of course. But after queen b3, black is not risking anything. Yeah, after queen b3, he may probably simply take, and such an endgame cannot be worse for black. Yeah, because black still has a pawn more. Black has the majority on the queen side, so potentially he can still hope for some better endgame, but the engine will tell you it is a simple draw. So if white seeks something more than a draw, then he will never play queen b3. He will hold the queen on board and will play something else. Can someone tell me? What shall be a better option for white?
Queen c5.
Yeah, after queen c5, black will also trade queens. That's similar idea as queen b3. White will try to hit the king faster than black will hit his one. So the fastest way how to get the king on g8 is going to be straight into him. That means queen e4, queen takes g6, and this way. And after queen e4, really, queen takes g6 is a threat. And again, now we have totally turnaround. Black can force the trade with a simple queen b1. But again, this is bringing the situation into totally equal. Because after the queens are traded on the b1, white will take on e7. Later on, will probably take on e6. But of course, black still has some majority on the side. He will get there some pawn, and it will be probably again plus minus equal. That means now it's turn for black. Can someone tell me better move than queen b1?
Queen f1.
Superb. Yeah, that's it. That's the same fight as a white before. Now black is tending to say, okay, I will kill you first. So king f1 with a simple idea, checkmate on h or g1. That means white has to get out the bishop like this. And black will probably take on f2 and log. Because now it seems to be black is dominant. But what now for white? Can someone tell me what now for white? Any idea? White was the first one who was...
Bishop takes h6.
Wonderful. Wow, amazing. Yeah, white was the first side who wanted to hit the king. So if someone is playing queen e4, must be ready for such operations and must be fit for this. And really, bishop takes h6 seems to be as an idea which is getting into it. And black has to care about it, of course. Not that easy. Black will probably get the check, no? Queen G1 check, King G3, and Rook D4. And Queen takes G6. Who has the upper hand here? What do you think? Who is the winner of this contest? Yeah, the truth is, this is a draw. Wonderful situation where both sides were working with the queens at best level, practically at best. They declined the queen straight, both, for sure, strongly, because it's getting the complications. If you want to get the win, it's good to get the complications. But I stopped your speech, so someone wanted to tell me something.
Queen E1.
Sure, yeah, that's an operative motive. Queen E1 check. If the king walks back, then the queen takes on E5, of course. But what happens if the king walks to F3?
Queen F1.
Queen F1.
Queen E1.
Yeah, good. It happens in a draw. And as mentioned, yeah, both sides declined the queen straight. That was fantastic because they wanted to use the power of the queen, and they believed, both sides believed, that they are stronger. In this contest, the objective says it is objectively a draw, but as you can see, it's so wild, it's so furious for both sides, then no one can say it was a bad decision. It was really good decision for both sides. Here at the beginning, for white, he wants to win. Every one of us wants the win, of course. So really, Queen E4, because after Queen B3, the game is slowly getting in a boring end game. It will be really boring because both sides will have practically no chances to be pretending the advantage. So yeah, using the queen, getting for it. As same now, black. If Queen B1, it would be probably the boring draw. Because while the queens would be traded, white will take some pawns, black will go into the queenside push. Then after all, white will maybe sacrifice the bishop for the passed pawn, and the rest will be the simple draw. So yeah, there happens again. Black wants to fight for win with the queen, never get the queen straight, and the rest we already seen. Sometimes it's fantastic to play with the queens, and what I wanted to mention to the finish, we also I tried to mention the objective factors which are involving the decisions, if trade, if not trade, if accept or decline, if you want to trade or if you want not to trade queens. There are also some subjective factors. Someone is operating more likely with queens. Someone is more likely operating without them on board. Of course, if you are attacker, you naturally want to save the queen on the board, but it's not healthy. You may work with the objectives of the position. So even if you like to work with queens, sometimes you have to deal without them on board if the objective factors are speaking for the trade. And all the best players can operate without queens as same they can operate with queens. So these subjective factors has to go away if you want to improve, if you want to be better players. You have to seek the objective factors and not decline the trade just because of you like to play with the queens on board. So that was the last what I wanted to mention. I really thank you for cooperation and sorry once more for my for my faults in the beginning with the screen, and also my mouse was not working after some minutes, but I hope that with touchpad was it all right. Thank you for this, and I hope we will meet later also.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Bye.
too.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.